All right, so are you ready to like really understand how government is changing? I mean, seriously changing.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, actually.
Yeah. So we're going to take a deep dive into all this modern public administration stuff, and we've got some pretty amazing research to share. I mean, there's stuff about countries like Estonia that are like light years ahead of everyone else.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And we'll even get into how things like artificial intelligence are going to like totally reshape how government works.
AI is definitely a game changer.
Yeah, for sure. So let's get started. I guess like a good place to start is with like the big picture, right? Like why is public administration even changing in the first place?
Yeah.
I mean, what's wrong with the way things have always been done?
Well, those old bureaucratic systems, they were kind of built for a different world, right? Like a world that was a lot simpler and slower.
Yeah.
But today, the challenges facing governments are just so much more complex.
Like way more complex.
Yeah, way more complex.
Yeah, I mean, you've got like climate change and all these crazy technological advancements happening at like warp speed.
Exactly. And people are also a lot more demanding now. They want to be more involved in the decisions that affect their lives.
Right. They're not just going to sit back and let the government do whatever it wants.
Nope. They want transparency and accountability.
Makes sense. So how are governments even supposed to keep up with all of this? I mean, it seems like a pretty daunting task.
One of the biggest shifts has been this idea of new public management, or NPM for short. It's basically about taking what works in the business world, like focusing on efficiency and setting clear performance goals, and then applying that to the public sector.
So it's kind of like running the government like a business.
In a way, yeah. It's about making sure that government is delivering value for money and that programs are actually achieving their intended outcomes.
Okay, so can you give me like a real world example of how this is actually playing out?
Sure. Well, Canada's federal government has been really proactive in incorporating performance management strategies. They're tracking progress, setting targets, and holding departments accountable for results.
Wow, so it's like they're treating citizens like customers in a way, making sure they're getting what they paid for.
Yeah, there's definitely an element of that. It's about shifting the focus from simply providing services to actually delivering outcomes that matter to people.
I can see how that would be appealing to taxpayers.
Yeah.
But does this new public management approach always work? I mean, are there any downsides?
Yeah, there are definitely some valid criticisms. Some people argue that it can lead to too much focus on cost cutting and that it can sometimes overlook the social impact of policies, especially on vulnerable populations.
So it's about finding that balance, right? Like, you don't want to just run government like a spreadsheet. You have to consider the human side of things, too.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot where you're being efficient and effective, but also compassionate and equitable.
Okay, so new public management is definitely shaking things up. But what about this whole digital governance thing? I've been hearing so much about that lately. It seems like some countries are really pushing the boundaries of what's possible with technology.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Estonia is like the poster child for digital governance. They've taken it to a whole other level.
I read that they do practically everything online. Voting, paying taxes, even registering a business. It's mind-blowing.
It is pretty incredible. They have this super advanced e-government system that's designed to make life easier for citizens and to increase transparency and efficiency.
Okay, but voting online, isn't that kind of risky? I mean, what about hacking and security breaches?
Well, of course, security is paramount, but Estonia has invested heavily in making sure their systems are secure. They use encryption, multi-factor authentication, and all sorts of other measures to protect against cyber threats.
So they're not just throwing caution to the wind. They're actually taking security very seriously.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And here's the interesting thing. By going digital, they've actually been able to increase transparency. Every action is logged and auditable, which arguably makes it more secure than traditional paper-based systems.
Wow, so they're actually ahead of the curve in terms of security and transparency. That's pretty impressive. But is this just a small country thing? Could a big city like New York ever pull this off?
Well, it's definitely happening on a larger scale. New York City has something called the Open Data Initiative. They're putting tons of city data online, everything from crime statistics to budget details to real-time public transit updates.
Wow, so New Yorkers can actually see where their tax dollars are gone. That's radical. But what's the point of all this data being out there? What are people actually doing with it?
That's where it gets really exciting. This open data can fuel innovation. Developers are using it to create apps that help people navigate the city, track air quality, even find affordable housing. It's putting information in the hands of citizens and allowing them to hold their government accountable.
So it's about empowering citizens and giving them the tools to make informed decisions.
Exactly. It's about democratizing information and making government more responsive to the needs of the people.
Okay, so we've got digital governance making waves. But what about the theory behind all of this? Are there certain frameworks that are driving these changes in how we think about public administration?
Absolutely. We've touched on new public management, but there's a whole universe of theories out there. One that's particularly relevant is complexity theory.
Complexity theory. Okay, let me get a bit of a breakdown on that one. What does that even mean in the context of government?
Think of it this way. Complexity theory is all about embracing the fact that the world is messy and unpredictable. Things are constantly changing, and traditional top-down approaches to government just can't keep up.
So instead of trying to control everything, it's about being flexible and adapting to the chaos. That seems pretty relevant to, well, just about everything these days.
Exactly. It means moving away from rigid bureaucratic systems and embracing more agile, collaborative approaches. And it recognizes that governments can't solve complex problems in isolation.
So we're talking about partnerships working across different sectors, getting everyone on the same page.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that solutions often come from unexpected places and that diverse perspectives are essential. It's called network governance, where public, private, and nonprofit sectors all come together to tackle big challenges.
Okay, so we've got the theoretical foundations laid out. But where is the research actually headed? What are the cutting-edge topics that are shaping the future of public administration?
Well, one area that's generating a ton of buzz is the use of technology, particularly artificial intelligence or AI, to improve public services. We're talking about things like using AI to analyze data, predict trends, and even personalize services for citizens.
AI and government.
Right.
That sounds straight out of a sci-fi movie, but I guess it makes sense. I mean, we're drowning in data these days. Is this actually happening, or is it just a bunch of hype?
Oh, it's definitely happening. Some cities are using AI to optimize traffic flow, predict crime hotspots, and even personalize educational resources for students. But of course, there are also some big questions about how to use AI ethically and responsibly.
Right, because you don't want to create a system where algorithms are making all the decisions and humans are just along for the ride.
Exactly. It's about finding the right balance between human oversight and the power of AI, and making sure that AI is being used to augment human capabilities, not replace them.
Okay, so we've got AI shaking things up. What else is on the research agenda? What are the big questions that are keeping public administration experts up at night?
Well, another major focus is on evidence-based policymaking. It's about moving away from gut feelings and political whims and grounding decisions in solid data and research.
So less ideology, more evidence. That sounds like a good thing, but I imagine it's not always that simple. Data can be messy and sometimes the answers aren't clear-cut.
You're absolutely right. It's not just about crunching numbers. It's about using data responsibly, considering the ethical implications, and recognizing that sometimes the best solutions involve more than just a simple algorithm.
So it's about combining data with human judgment experience and a deep understanding of the issues at hand.
Exactly. It's about using data to inform decisions, but not to dictate them. And it's about recognizing that sometimes the most important data points come from the people who are directly affected by policies.
Speaking of people, we've talked a lot about technology and data, but what about the human side of all this? I'm curious about how modern public administration is addressing issues like social equity and sustainability.
Those are absolutely critical considerations, and there's a lot of exciting research happening in those areas. For example, there's a growing focus on how to make public services more inclusive and accessible, especially for marginalized communities.
So it's about making sure that everyone benefits from these advancements, not just the privileged few.
Precisely. And it's about recognizing that different communities may have different needs and priorities. A one-size-fits-all approach simply won't work.
Okay, so inclusivity is key. What about sustainability? How is that factoring into modern public administration?
The sustainability is becoming increasingly important, especially in the face of climate change and other environmental challenges. We're seeing a lot of innovation in areas like urban planning, transportation, and energy management, all with the goal of creating more sustainable and resilient communities.
Resilience.
Yeah.
That seems to be a recurring theme here. But what does it actually mean in the context of government? Is it just about bouncing back from disasters, or is there more to it?
Resilience is definitely about being prepared for crises, but it's also about being adaptable, being able to learn from mistakes and continuously improving systems to better serve the needs of citizens.
So it's about building systems that can not only withstand shocks, but also evolve and adapt to the constant changes happening in the world around us.
Exactly. And that's something that's relevant not just for governments, but for all of us. We all need to be thinking about how we can build resilience into our lives and communities.
Well, that's a lot to process. We've covered a lot of ground, from digital governance to complexity theory to the ethics of AI, but I'm already starting to see how all of these pieces fit together, how they're all part of this larger shift toward a more modern, more citizen-centric approach to government.
That's a great observation. And I think that's a perfect segue into our next discussion, where we'll delve deeper into how these trends are playing out in the real world and explore some of the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. It's
Yeah.
going to be fascinating. You know, it's really something to see how these ideas we've been talking about are actually being put into practice. I mean, like in the real world.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah.
Like in our last deep dive, we were blown away by Estonia and their whole e-government thing, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
like something out of the future.
Oh, yeah, for sure. They're definitely ahead of the curve.
I'm still kind of stuck on the fact that they vote online. Like, seriously,
Yeah.
they've been doing that for like almost 20 years. Wow.
It's pretty amazing, right?
Yeah.
And it really works for them.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, like, what's holding everyone else back?
Hmm.
I mean, why aren't more countries doing this?
Well, it's not quite as simple as just flipping a switch. There are a lot of factors involved.
Like what?
Well, for one thing, Estonia got a really early start on this whole digital identity thing. They made a conscious decision to invest in a secure and reliable digital ID system for all of their citizens.
So it's like everyone has a digital passport that they can use for everything.
Exactly. And that makes it so much easier to do things online like voting, paying taxes, accessing government services. It really streamlines the whole process.
I can see how that would be a game changer. But what about people who aren't so tech savvy? I mean, not everyone is comfortable doing everything online.
That's a valid concern, and Estonia has been very mindful of that. They've made sure to provide support and training for those who need help navigating the digital world.
So they're not just leaving people behind.
No, definitely not. They've also made sure that certain services are still available offline for those who prefer it.
That makes sense. So it's really about giving people options and meeting them where they're at.
Exactly. It's about using technology to make life easier for everyone, not just the tech elite.
Okay, so Estonia is leading the charge in digital governance. What about other countries? Are there any other like shining examples of governments using technology to really transform public services?
Oh, absolutely. South Korea is another country that's doing some really innovative things, particularly with their smart city initiatives.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about smart cities lately, but to be honest, it all sounds a bit futuristic to me. Like, what does that even mean in practice?
Well, basically, it's about using technology and data to create more efficient, sustainable, and livable urban environments.
Okay, so can you give me some concrete examples? Like, how is this actually playing out in South Korea?
Sure. Well, Seoul, the capital city, has implemented a really sophisticated smart traffic management system that uses sensors and real-time data to optimize traffic flow and reduce congestion.
So it's like a supercharged version of Google Maps.
Kinda, yeah, but on a much larger scale.
Hmm.
And it's not just about saving people time, it's also about reducing emissions, improving air quality, and making the city a more pleasant place to live.
So it's a win-win for everyone, right? Less
Right.
time stuck in traffic and cleaner air to breathe. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Exactly. And then there's Songdo, which is actually a purpose-built smart city. It was designed from the ground up to incorporate sustainable technologies and innovative urban planning.
A purpose-built smart city. Wow, that's next level. What kind of cool stuff do they have there?
Well, for one thing, they have a pneumatic waste disposal system that whisks garbage away underground.
Underground garbage disposal. That's insane. So no more smelly trash trucks on the streets.
Nope, it's all handled underground. It's really quite impressive.
Yeah, that sounds pretty awesome. Okay, so we've got Estonia and South Korea showing us what's possible with technology.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears a bit. We've talked a lot about efficiency and innovation, but what about the human side of all this? I mean, what about social equity and making sure that everyone benefits from these advancements?
That's a really important point, and it's something that we can't afford to overlook. Technology can be a powerful tool for good, but it can also exacerbate existing inequalities if we're not careful.
Right, because it's easy to get caught up in all the cool gadgets and forget about the people who might be left behind.
Exactly. And that's why it's so crucial to make sure that everyone has access to technology and digital literacy training so that they can participate in the digital economy and benefit from these new opportunities.
So it's not just about building the infrastructure, it's also about empowering people to use it.
Absolutely. And it's also about designing systems that are inclusive and accessible to people of all abilities and backgrounds.
Okay, so inclusivity is key. But what about the bigger picture? How is social equity being integrated into modern public administration more broadly?
Well, there's a growing recognition that traditional top-down approaches to government often fail to adequately address the needs of marginalized communities. So we're seeing a shift toward more collaborative and participatory approaches that involve citizens in the decision-making process.
So it's about giving people a seat at the table and making sure their voices are heard.
Precisely. And it's about recognizing that different communities may have different needs and priorities. A one-size-fits-all approach simply won't work.
This makes me think about something we touched on earlier, co-production. Can you remind us what that is and how it relates to social equity?
Sure, co-production is essentially about citizens and governments working together as partners to design and deliver public services.
Okay, so it's more than just getting feedback from citizens. It's about actively involving them in the process of creating solutions.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that citizens are experts in their own lives and that they have valuable insights and perspectives that can inform the design and delivery of public services.
So what are some concrete examples of co-production in action? How are governments actually putting this into practice?
One great example is participatory budgeting, where citizens have a direct say in how public funds are allocated. This can involve community meetings, online voting platforms, and other mechanisms that allow citizens to prioritize projects and programs that are important to them.
So instead of the government deciding how to spend money, it's the people who are directly impacted who get to make those decisions.
Yeah.
That's pretty powerful.
It is. And it can lead to more responsive and effective use of public funds because the projects that are funded are those that are truly valued by the community.
Are there any other examples of co-production that come to mind?
Another great example is citizen science, where citizens collaborate with scientists to collect data and contribute to research projects. This can range from monitoring water quality in local rivers to tracking bird migrations.
Wait, so everyday people can actually participate in scientific research? I love that. It makes science so much more accessible and relatable.
Absolutely. Citizen science is a powerful way to engage the public in scientific inquiry and harness the collective knowledge and observations of a community.
This all sounds incredibly promising. But I'm also wondering about the challenges of implementing these types of approaches. It seems like it would require a lot of trust and collaboration between citizens and government.
You're absolutely right. Co-production requires a shift in mindset both on the part of citizens and government officials. It requires building relationships, fostering open communication, and being willing to share power and decision-making authority.
So it's about moving away from that traditional adversarial relationship between citizens and government and embracing a more collaborative model.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're all in this together and that we can achieve better outcomes when we work together.
Okay, so we've talked about digital governance, smart cities, co-production, and the importance of social equity. What other key concepts or trends should we be aware of when we're thinking about the future of public administration?
Well, one concept that's becoming increasingly important is that of resilience, particularly in the face of crises like pandemics, natural disasters, and climate change.
Resilience, right? You mentioned that earlier. But what does it actually mean in the context of governance?
Resilience is essentially the capacity of a system to withstand shocks and stresses and to adapt and bounce back from adversity. In the context of governance, it means having systems in place that can anticipate and respond to crises, effectively minimize disruption, and recover quickly.
So it's not just about reacting to crises, it's about being prepared and having the capacity to adapt and learn from those experiences.
Exactly. It's about having flexible and responsive systems that can adjust to changing circumstances and emerge stronger from challenges.
That makes a lot of sense. So how can governments build resilience into their systems? Where do they even start?
Well, it involves a multifaceted approach. One key aspect is investing in robust infrastructure, both physical and digital. This means having reliable transportation networks, communication systems, and energy grids that can withstand disruptions. It also means having secure and adaptable digital systems that can continue to function even in the face of cyber attacks or other technological challenges.
So it's about having strong foundations that can weather the storm. I can see how that would be critical in a world that seems to be facing more and more crises these days.
Precisely. But resilience is not just about physical infrastructure. It's also about having strong social and institutional structures that can support communities during times of crisis. This means having effective social safety nets, robust public health systems, and trusted community organizations that can provide assistance and support.
So it's about having a strong social fabric that can hold things together when times get tough. That makes a lot of sense. But it also sounds like a tall order. How can governments even begin to build that kind of resilience?
It definitely requires a long-term commitment and a willingness to invest in the well-being of communities. It also requires building trust and collaboration between government citizens and community organizations.
Okay, so we've got resilient infrastructure, strong social structures. What else is important for building resilience in governance?
Another key aspect is fostering a culture of learning and adaptation. This means being willing to acknowledge mistakes, learn from past experiences, and continuously improve systems and processes. It also means embracing innovation and being open to new ideas and approaches that can enhance resilience.
So it's about being flexible, being willing to change, and always looking for ways to improve. It seems like that would be especially important in the context of something like climate change, where we're facing so much uncertainty about the future.
Exactly. Resilience is not a static state. It's an ongoing process of learning, adapting, and evolving.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we actually measure resilience? How do we know if a system is truly resilient?
That's a great question, and it's something that researchers are still working to define and measure effectively. There are various frameworks and indicators that can be used to assess resilience, but it's a complex and multifaceted concept that doesn't lend itself to easy quantification.
So it's not just about ticking boxes on a checklist. It's about having a more holistic understanding of a system's strengths and weaknesses.
Exactly. Resilience is about more than just being able to withstand a particular shock or stress. It's about having the capacity to adapt and thrive in the face of ongoing change and uncertainty.
Okay, so resilience is about adaptability, flexibility, and continuous learning. It sounds like a pretty essential quality for any government in today's rapidly changing world.
It absolutely is. And it's not just about governments either. Resilience is something that we need to build at all levels of society, in our communities, our businesses, and even in our personal lives.
So it's a mindset as much as it is a set of policies or practices.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that change is inevitable and embracing the challenges and opportunities that come with it.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, from digital governance to smart cities to co-production to resilience. It seems like the field of public administration is constantly evolving. But all of these advancements and trends seem to be pointing in the same direction, toward a more citizen-centric, collaborative, and adaptable approach to governance.
That's a great observation. And I think it's really exciting to see how these ideas are being put into practice around the world. But as with any major shift, there are also challenges and complexities to navigate.
That's what I was just thinking, like, how do these trends play out in different parts of the world? And what are some of the potential pitfalls we need to be aware of as we embrace these new approaches to governance?
Those are excellent questions, and I think they're perfect topics to explore in the final part of our deep dive.
All right, so we're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into the future of government. It's been a wild ride.
It has, hasn't it? We've covered so much ground.
We have, and I feel like I've learned a ton. Like, I had no idea governments were doing such innovative things with technology.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how fast things are changing.
Totally. So in this last part, I want to kind of zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Like, how are these trends playing out globally? Are some countries racing ahead while others are lagging behind?
It's definitely a mixed bag. We see pockets of innovation happening all over the world, but the pace and scale of adoption vary quite a bit.
Okay, so who are the front runners? Who's really setting the bar high for everyone else?
Well, we've already talked about Estonia quite a bit. They're definitely a leader in digital governance. They've really embraced the potential of technology to streamline services and empower citizens.
Yeah, they're like the rock stars of e-government.
And then there's South Korea, which is another standout with their smart city initiatives. They're using data and technology to tackle urban challenges in really creative ways.
Like that underground garbage disposal system in Songdo. That's just mind-blowing.
It is pretty cool.
So those are the gold medalists, so to speak. But what about other regions? Where are we seeing progress and where are the challenges more pronounced?
Well, in Europe, we're seeing a lot of experimentation with open data initiatives and participatory budgeting. Cities like Barcelona and Paris are finding ways to actively involve citizens in shaping their communities.
That's awesome. But are there any concerns about like digital divides and making sure that everyone has access to these new technologies?
Oh, absolutely. That's a big challenge, particularly in developing countries where access to technology and digital literacy can be limited.
Right, because technology can be a great equalizer, but only if everyone has the opportunity to use it.
Exactly. There's a real need for investment in infrastructure and education to bridge that gap.
Okay, so there's a lot to consider on a global level.
Yeah.
But let's zoom in a bit and talk about some of the potential pitfalls we need to be aware of as we embrace these new approaches to governance. Like I'm thinking about things like privacy, data security, even the role of human judgment in a world where algorithms are becoming more powerful.
You've hit on some really important points. As governments gather more data about their citizens, it's absolutely crucial that they have strong safeguards in place to protect that data and ensure it's not misused.
Right, because we've all seen those sci-fi movies where governments use technology to control and manipulate people. It's easy to dismiss those as fiction, but it does make you think about the potential for abuse.
It definitely does. We need to be vigilant about protecting our privacy and holding our governments accountable for how they use our data.
So data privacy is one big concern. What about the role of human judgment? I mean, if we're increasingly relying on algorithms to make decisions, does that mean we're giving up our own agency?
That's a question that's generating a lot of debate, and there's no easy answer. It's something we need to be discussing as a society. How do we strike the right balance between efficiency and human oversight? How do we ensure that algorithms are being used ethically and responsibly?
Right, because algorithms are only as good as the data they're trained on. And if that data reflects existing biases, then the algorithms can perpetuate those biases or even amplify them.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to involve diverse perspectives in the development and deployment of these technologies. We need to be constantly questioning assumptions and looking for potential blind spots.
So it's not just about the technology itself, it's about the human values and principles that guide how we use it.
Precisely. And it's about recognizing that technology is a tool. It can be used for good or for bad, and it's up to us to decide how we want to shape that future.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've explored the exciting possibilities of digital governance, the importance of social equity and resilience, and the need to be mindful of the ethical challenges that come with any new technology. If you could leave our listeners with just one key takeaway, what would it be?
That's a tough one. But I think the most important thing to remember is that the future of governance is not just about technology, it's about people. It's about empowering citizens, fostering collaboration, and creating systems that are truly responsive to the needs and aspirations of the people they serve.
Beautifully said. It's about humanizing government, making it more accessible, more equitable, and more responsive to the needs of everyone. And ultimately, I think that's a future worth striving for.
I agree.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. I want to thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to all of you listening out there, thank you for joining us on this journey into the world of modern public administration. It's a fascinating field that's constantly evolving, and we hope you'll continue to explore it with us. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep pushing for a better future.